All right, what's going on, YouTube fam? Self-explanatory video. Of course, this is our time to get some work done, but I do have a challenge for you during this one. No phones during the breaks. We're gonna see how long we end up doing this. My expectation is it's gonna be a 2-hour, 45-minute work, 15-minute break kind of sessions. Of course, I'll be in the comments, answering questions, engaging with people, talking to you guys, saying what's up during the breaks. So feel free to pop in there, say hello. But the goal is no phones during the break. And the reason behind this is there is quite a bit of evidence out that remembering the things that you're studying or that you're learning requires the brain to relax after learning it. And if you overstimulate the brain right away after trying to learn something, then you may not be able to retain the things that you just learned. And the habit is to go for these Pomodoro cycles of 45 minutes of work and then grab the phone and overstimulate the brain by going on social media and doing other things like that. And then you're doing a disservice to the work that you just put in. So goal for this stream, no phones during the breaks. So I'm putting my phone here, away, over here. And this is also now week 2 in a row of a streak that I am trying to maintain of at least going live once a week to study with you guys. So we'll see how this goes. I'm going to get the lo-fi vibes going. Also, please let me know in the chat if you can't hear me well or if the background music is too loud or too quiet or whatever. I'm still learning these settings, but excited to get this work done, and I'll see you at the break. right. Session number 1 is done. Shout out to everybody who has come. All these foods, Kate Kelly, Black Cat. Congrats on finishing up that med school app so it can be submitted today. Earlier you get that in, the better position you'll be during the med school application. Reem, sorry that you have to go to work, man. We will have many of these in the future. Definitely looking forward to you joining us for these study with me vibes. Again, challenge for today is during the breaks to avoid being around the phone. When you're with your phone, when you go directly to your phone after studying, you're doing a disservice to the brain and a disservice to all of the work that you just put in. The brain actually needs some time to basically like recover from that grind session that you just put in, and getting into an overly stimulated state by scrolling on social media or responding to text messages or whatever, things like that, actually makes it harder for the brain to retain and cement all of that learning that you just did into itself, and network all of those neural network pathways that it needs to make sure that all that work you just did doesn't go down the drain. So 13 and a half more minutes. Let's see, am I cooked because it's June 22nd? No, Black Cat, you still have time. It's still not too late to submit your application. Definitely do it as early as possible. The earlier you do it. So when you're applying to medical school, I tell people this all the time, like, it's a human process. AI is running a lot of things in this world right now, but the application is not one. And I sat on the admission committee for Mayo for 2 years, and I saw how there was a lot of excitement at the beginning of the application season. Everyone was excited to read personal statements, get to know people, learn more about people through their experiences, and all of those kind of things. And then towards the end of the season, it became more of a burden, and people were stressed, and they just were exhausted because of the long season. And so there's a human element to someone reading your story when they're excited and motivated and just want to meet all of these super ambitious pre-medical students, and how they perceive you as a candidate when they're excited versus how they do when they're tired and burnt out. So that's one reason why it's valuable to apply early when you're applying to medical school. But the second reason is that most of the schools now are using rolling admissions, which means that they have a set number of interview invitations that they hand out. And you can think about it, again, as a human process. If I have 20 interview invitations that I can hand out at the beginning of the season, I have all 20. And I'm starting to I'm excited. I love all these applicants. I'm like, you get an interview, you get an interview, you get an interview. Towards the end of the season, when I only have 5 left, I'm probably a little bit more stingy with those, and maybe a little bit more hesitant to give interview invitations, and more likely to put people on wait lists and things like that. So there's multiple reasons why, applying early is favorable, but you're not cooked just because it's June 22nd. You still have some time. This is a long season, but definitely try to get that in as soon as possible. Let's see what else we have here. Shumete Sam studying for prereqs, applying 2026. Let's go. Good luck. You're going to absolutely crush it. Let's see. Black Cat, I'm finalizing my last 2 most meaningfuls and refining my personal statement draft. You got it. You're at the tail end of that primary application. You're going to crush it. Joshua, other than Anki, what study methods do you utilize? Do you write notes? Blurt, mind map? Really good question. So there is 2 primary principles of studying that's evidence-based, that's proven in research to make you perform on tests. But most importantly, remember the things that you're learning. And those 2 things that you should center all of your studying around are active recall and spaced repetition. So the reason why I'm such a big proponent of Anki is that it's built into the system. A flashcard system. Active recall just means testing yourself, and spaced repetition just means doing that over time in intervals so that you don't forget. And Anki basically just uses an algorithm and flashcards to accomplish those 2 things. And so it's automated, and it just does that. It just does the thing. The problem with taking notes or reading and things like that, for the most part, those are what are now termed passive learning techniques. And the reason they're termed passive learning is because when you are reading through, I forget what fallacy this is called, but essentially when you're just like reading text or taking notes, you can trick your brain into thinking that you actually know exactly what you're reading or taking notes about because the information is right in front of you. And so if you've ever had that experience where you feel confident because you're reading things and you feel like you're understanding and you're knowing what's going on, and then you get to the test and then suddenly it just feels like you forget or you don't know anymore. Some people falsely attribute that experience to being a poor test taker, but that's not actually what's going on. Test taking is just a skill. It's something, you're not born a bad test taker or a good test taker. You just develop the skills. But if you have that experience, you're not a bad test taker. That's not what's making that experience happen. It's more so because you tricked your brain to knowing the material before when you didn't really know it. You just were kind of reading it or taking notes on it or seeing it, in those mind maps. And all of those are good supplemental strategies, particularly if that's how you find it helpful to kind of just have a general good understanding of the material. But you can't rely on that as a form of learning because it's not active. It's not making you generate the material without like not seeing it. When you're taking notes or sometimes when you're creating mind maps, those kind of things, you're oftentimes looking at the material on a PowerPoint or in a textbook or something like that, and then writing out the things that you find important from that. So you're referencing something. So you're not having, you're using the textbook or the PowerPoint or whatever resource to reference your note-taking system rather than relying on your brain to pull that information out. And so that's why flashcards and practice questions, things like that, where it's a closed book experience, right? You don't have access to actually the source of information. You just have to retrieve it from your brain. That actually is how you are that's that active recall part of this kind of dynamic duo of spaced repetition and active recall. Having to force yourself to pull it out is what's really proving to yourself that you know the material, and also training your brain to the practice of retrieving information, which is how you perform on tests. And so because test taking is primarily based on a retrieval process and memory, using study techniques that rely on that is probably more optimal than ones that rely mostly on note taking. Now, that's not to say that note taking isn't helpful, but for tests in particular, if it's for tests and not just to have something that you can reference in an open book kind of situation, if you're walking to go and see a patient and want to pull out a notes, something on how to take care of a similar patient that you had before you get to that patient, you're just looking through your own personal notes. That's different. But for test taking purposes, because tests are based on retrieval from your brain, using things like Anki, practice questions, flashcards, those systems are usually preferred. Watching some Boards and Beyond, let's go. Definitely immunology, not as fun as MSK. I feel you, Rashad. What made me choose Mayo over Emory, etc.? Interested in ortho. Just trying to get into med school right now. So it's funny because that reminds me of like the first YouTube videos that I ever put out, which were like me going through the medical school like interview trail, and now the interviews all virtual. But when I was going through, I had to kind of go and travel to all of these different places. And I remember going to Emory and interviewing at Emory. And I loved Emory. I loved all of the places that I interviewed at. I was very fortunate throughout the application cycle in interviewing at great schools, Duke and Emory and Brown and Northwestern and a few others, phenomenal programs. But for me, Mayo was for two reasons that just fit actually perfectly. One was the kind of clinical experience that I'd have being able to learn under experts in the field, and I want to be a leader in medicine. And I just feel like there's a lot of those here at the Mayo Clinic. And I don't just think of like learning medicine. I think of like learning all of the leadership principles to make people very renowned physicians. And, whether it's how they conduct research, whether it's how they sit in various committees and present things, or, educate residents, all of these kind of things that I think make for a leader I just thought that there were a lot of people here that I'd be able to learn from. You can learn you learn medicine, honestly, through medical school, probably preferably on a Boards and Beyond or Sketchy or something like that. And so, the medical school curriculum, I don't think should weigh too much into one person's decision, but the people who are there, I think does. So that was one. Not to say that there's not phenomenal people at all these other places too, but that was one thing. But then the second thing that really distinguished Mayo from the other places was like personal reason. And it was because my wife, Madison, is from Minnesota. Her family, her parents still live 45 minutes away from us now. And now we have 2 kids. We knew that we were going to be growing our family in medical school. So being at a place where, close to in-laws, my wife is happy. She's comfortable. This is home essentially for her, and her parents are 45 minutes away. It just was the best of both worlds. I get the most ideal and optimized medical training for me personally, and then my wife gets to be close to family as she kind of goes through this experience too, because it's hard for significant others too. And so that was kind of what made me choose Mayo for medical school and then end up staying for residency. So definitely multifactorial, but I definitely, I used to recommend going and watching those old videos of me going through the medical school application cycle. They're so old and I cringe so much at watching them that I almost like ask you not to do that. Maybe I should make like new updated videos on like how to write personal statements and talk about your experiences and all those kind of things, because those were some of my first videos. But the quality of those videos make me cringe. We have about 3 minutes left. One of the things that since we're kind of on the topic of talking about performing in medical school and stuff like that, I just had a meeting, actually an event with my Teach As You Learn community, which you definitely should join if you're not already. And we just talked about performing on step 1, which is the first USMLE exam that you take usually at the end of your second year, or sometimes at the end of your first year, depending on your program, or 1.5 years in. And we just talked about how basically starting medical school and not thinking about studying for, or not thinking about like passing finals, like your final for biochem and then your final for histology, but instead thinking about you're just studying for step 1 until you pass step 1, and then you're studying for step 2. And the finals for the individual blocks are like, quizzes almost that you used to have in college, where you would have the final and intermittently you would have quizzes just to make sure that you're on track and, studying regularly. That's how I would think about, starting medical school. I know a lot of people are starting medical school soon, and I highly recommend thinking about prioritizing studying for the step exam as a whole, and that every block is just a piece of that. And when you think about it like that, when that's your mindset, then you actually, continue to review biochemistry when you're in cardiology, because you know that you're not just studying for cardiology, you're studying for step 1. And you're just reviewing all of these different kind of things, and you're not completely forgetting about things and just zoning in too far into the one topic that's right in front of you, which is very, very easy to do in medical school. But I think when you're able to do that, then when you actually do get to that step 1 time, you're not having to get into a panic and try to learn everything in a short period of time. You've been reviewing all 1.5 to 2 years, and you don't have to take dedicated study periods. It's very easy for you to just cruise through step 1. So let's see, last question here before we go into our last one. Any recommendations for the internship? I'm assuming, Carlos, maybe you're talking about like a sub internship or something like that. And I think the biggest recommendation that I have for sub-Is when you're doing like away rotations and or home rotations, this internship kind of season that medical students do during their 4th year, is develop relationships. It is a relationship-centered experience, performing good on internships. It's not about how much you know. It's not about proving, like that you've been studying a ton and know a lot and can do a lot. It's mostly about showing that you are somebody that the other residents would be interested in being friends with, and that senior residents would be interested in teaching, and that faculty would be interested in, teaching and mentoring. And they assume that if you've gotten this far that you know how to learn and you'll be able to learn. But there's an emotional intelligence component and a social component of that plays a really big role in performing in these rotations. And if you become somebody's, friend, or if you become somebody's mentee over a short period of time, that's how they end up advocating for you. I've sat on, some of these meetings where residents review the rotating students, the visiting medical students and home students during this intern period. And I've never heard people talk about they missed this question or, those kind of things. It's usually like, I just loved having this student around, he or she were always on time, worked really, really hard, and, just were a good person to be around. And it's hard. It's like a fine line to walk, because you want to do a lot and show a lot, but you don't want to be annoying. And there's a whole kind of social kind of I don't know, you're just walking a fine line socially, which is a difficult thing to do. So that's probably the biggest challenge, but it's also kind of how you excel the most if you're able to walk that line and develop strong relationships. So going into these experiences thinking relationship first instead of impressing people with knowledge, I think it will suit you very well. So with that, we will get going with our next 45-minute sprint, and then we will call it for that. At the end, of course, as questions come up, throw them in there. After this 45 minutes, I'll get to those too. But we'll just keep cranking away. Appreciate you guys for being here.
Today, I want to tell you guys a story.
All right. We have finished. Congratulations on cranking through about 2 hours of work with me. Let me go to the comments quick. See. Oh, shout out Jared. Man, can't wait to shake your hand one day too. You've been riding with me since day one. Carlos, bless you too, man. Diddy underscore Bylinka. Shout out to you for finishing step one. No more studying. Much deserved rest. Hopefully people had fun though. And only God daily. Blessings to you too. So again, we will be doing this regularly. There'll probably be lots of challenges that we'll do together. Today's challenge was to not grab this during the breaks. I wonder if you succeeded with that or not. I had to because you guys were watching. So, but again, when you're doing these Pomodoro cycles, try to avoid going to the phone for a break. There's actually good data to suggest literally just looking at nothing. So just like looking at this blue wall for me, for example, for a few minutes and just not doing anything, or even taking like a notepad and a pen and just freely scribbling and drawing or whatever. Those kind of things are going to be much better than going on the phone and scrolling Instagram during a break for a Pomodoro cycle. But we will be doing this. Oh no, so didn't finish. We'll be doing this a lot more. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel and follow me on Instagram. Instagram is where I kind of share when I'm going live. So follow me there, join my community as well, because I share when I'm going live, and you have also other kind of events and stuff like that to hang out with me, interact with me, and teach as you learn. But hopefully you guys got some good work done. And most importantly, hopefully you guys feel motivated to continue going if you need to, and encouraged to take a break and feel like you've done something positive for yourself, if that's you too. So I don't stream daily, but I am streaming at least weekly. There's going to be at least once a week. So definitely. And Mocha, please ask any questions. I'm happy that you're here and happy to answer any questions that you have if I can. But we will be doing this at least weekly. So this is now 2. This is my second stream I've ever done. So still practicing, still wanting to make things aesthetically pleasing. But shout out to you for subscribing. We'll be doing this a lot more. Let's see. Mocha, I see you have a question. Feel free. While we wait on that last question, I'm going to talk a little bit about a topic that I touched on in my most recent video, which I highly recommend looking at if you haven't yet. And that is on mentorship, community building, network, all of those kind of things. It's really just the importance of building a network as you go throughout this process. And so many students prioritize their academic kind of portfolio, which is appropriate early on in your career. When you're pre-med applying to medical school, you need your letters of recommendation, personal statement, list of 10 plus experiences, potentially some research, shadowing hours, all of these things. Now as a resident, when I'm thinking about applying to fellowship, there are 2 things that I need. One is research, and 2 is a network of sponsors. And when I say sponsor, this means more than just mentor, but somebody who's willing to advocate on my behalf, somebody who's willing to pick up a phone and call a fellowship director or a program. And the same applies for getting jobs, after your training. Research is always going to be kind of the currency for how your CV or resume is weighted, but your network becomes significantly more valuable as you go throughout this process. So the earlier you start to, really lean into building that network, growing a community of mentors and peers around you that, will not only be a part of your journey, but help you get to the next stages of your journey. It's incredibly, incredibly important. So hopefully you guys can take that with you and continue to kind of push forward in your network building. It's a scary skill to develop, and sometimes it requires cold emails and, getting out of your comfort zone and talking to somebody in person and doing things like that. But it is worth it. So check out the video if you want some more tangible tips on, how you can kind of go about doing that. Mocha, can you give some advice on studying for an oral exam? Because in college, written tests are only the first part of the exam. If we pass, then we have an oral exam in which draw questions. So really good question, Mocha. I think performing on oral exams is something that will set you up for success in the future too, because once you're done with your training, you have oral exams that you have to take as well. I think the best thing with any type of exam is practicing. And so having either if it's yourself in the mirror or having somebody who can serve as a mock oral examiner for you. I think that's always going to be the best way of practice. The other thing that you can do is I'm assuming that these are going to just be kind of live questions, almost like an interview style exam where they're just asking you things based on whatever the topic is that you're discussing. And so one thing that's pretty interesting and will actually help get your brain oriented into the mind of the examiner is think about the questions that you would ask someone if you were in the examiner's shoes. And thinking about that will actually trigger not only certain questions that the examiner might prompt you with, but also the way in which an appropriate and strong answer could be framed. And if you're thinking at it from their lens, it's pretty helpful because first you realize, the position that the examiner's in. So when you're actually face to face with that examiner, there's a sense of empathy that's shared between you. It kind of creates this subtle, connection between you and the examiner. But, most importantly, I think for you, it allows you to recognize the way at which examiners are often trying to get answers from you, what they're looking for, those kind of things. And, you can have a friend serve as a mock examiner for you, but you can also flip it and serve as a mock examiner for them. And they don't have to answer anything if they're not in this field or whatever, but it gives you the opportunity to get into the brain of somebody who will be asking you the questions. And, for those kind of experiences, I think that could be pretty helpful. CA, absolutely, man. Good luck on the step 2 grind. It's, when you're in that season, it definitely can feel like it's the most important thing ever. And, for the most part, it is very, very important. So I'm happy that you're taking it serious because, step 2 is the standardized test that you have in med school now that's graded as step 1 is now pass fail. So, it matters for right now. And it sounds like you're crushing it and you're doing great in your studies. And so, once that's off your back, you can move on to something that will be more long lasting because in residency applications, they don't care about step 2 anymore, but they do, or for fellowship applications, sorry, they don't care about step 2 anymore, but they do for residency applications. But for all of this, they care about network. So I'm happy that I was able to share that with you, that piece of encouragement, and hopefully you'll be able to crush step 2 and then continue to grow your network along the way. But I will call it here. I think we have all the questions answered. I look forward to doing this again very, very shortly, very soon. We will do this and maybe we'll try to push it past 2 hours. Maybe the next one will be 3 or more. So thank you guys. And of course, this wouldn't be my Evolving Medic channel if I didn't end with this. So as always,